Scott got us already, so.
All right, we're just about to go live on YouTube, apparently, just FYI.
That's when I go quiet.
If it works. Let's see.
Then I start behaving better.
Okay, we're muted.
Okay. Okay, is this different? Did I read the wrong agenda?
It's the
It's
city
the city
council.
council. Oh my gosh, okay. I wasn't even looking at the top. I was like, I'm reading.
That was a long. We're gonna hurry this up because I have to get.
I was worried for you. I was like, wait. Thanks, man. for setting me up.
The change.
Oh, I didn't even look at that. I just went straight to, okay, where are we at first? All right, well, we better get us going. then if we need to go. Yeah, well, you tell us.
Okay.
We do legally have a quorum, correct?
Yes.
So we don't really have any
We don't have anything we need to.
major issue. I guess.
Where's your daughter?
My goal is to be finished by 7:30, you guys.
Oh, no.
So I want to talk to.
Where's your daughter visiting from?
She lives in Oklahoma and it was their anniversary last week and her husband gave her tickets to just come and spend a day, 2 days with her mom and her sister. In the fall, he arranged for babysitters and everything.
You said Oklahoma? Is it
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City?
You were nice. We should have called in.
So I almost did, and because I woke up about noon. I thought, oh, it's fine. Maybe I should not call, but I knew Heron wasn't gonna be here. I looked at the agenda. So,
Yeah.
and said, we should go. They're just talking right now, so. I want to get out
That's important. That's hard to miss. I would have supported a sick day for you.
Here comes Jeff.
Oh, yeah, Nick Jeff in charge. He needs to go. Can you do that, man?
My what?
Can you tap out and just have Jeff go?
If we're going long, I'm going to.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff. Hello.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Yeah.
Hello, Jeff.
How are we doing?
Show me some eyes. I have to be going by 7:30.
Good, let's do it.
it.
Let's do it. 7.
Really? We never have that.
Oh, well, I make a motion to close.
I know. You need me to talk, keep talking?
I feel like when I'm no stories.
Now live on your channel, Alan Luce's Zoom meeting. That's exciting.
Alan Luce Zoom. Did you? What did I miss out on?
Oh, I don't remember. What was it? Wasn't too exciting.
It wasn't too bad.
I don't want to look through my notes to even see what it was.
No.
It was the.
Ward, Mr. Ward.
Oh, yeah, the little flat block kind of.
The business.
Yeah, oh,
behind
the
American
commercial,
Carpets,
yeah,
whatever. And what
the
was
little
other one?
commercial subdivision.
And what was the other one? I don't remember.
Well,
It
then
was a
the other,
public hearing for something.
the other thing was the moderate income.
I have some new thoughts about what I think about it.
About,
Modern income housing.
and what he could be decided.
Well, I think if we have to do it, then we need to take it serious and like.
Well, that's what he said. All right, We will open our planning commission meeting. Welcome to Planning Commission North Logan, September 22nd, 2022. We will have the flag ceremony by Dwight and prayer by me. Look over there.
Please join me in the pledge allegiance to the flag. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we come together tonight at this planning commission meeting, and we are grateful for the opportunity we have to live in this beautiful community. We're thankful for the good people that live here. We're grateful for those that are willing to serve and teach and help and take care of our community. We pray for thy spirit to be with us tonight. Please help us to be able to talk through things in a good way, to be able to think clearly and to work well together. We are grateful for the blessings that we have, grateful for the rain that we've received, and pray that we might be able to continue to have enough moisture and be able to continue to live in a good place. We're thankful for this time and this ability we have to meet together in a free country, and pray now for these blessings and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Dwight.
And he did a great
He
job.
did a good job.
Very perfect.
Welcome, Alan. We're glad to see you here.
Rebellious, saying the pledge anymore.
Okay, we need to
Society's
have
gone.
an adoption of the agenda. Have anybody willing to?
I'll make that motion that we adopt the agenda as presented to us.
I second that.
Okay, so Jeff has made a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight, and Heather seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. We have the agenda adopted. Any minutes, Bree? I must.
There's like 3 of them. Is that the
Okay,
ones that were emailed out? The ones that were emailed out.
you know what? I didn't look at that. I'm sorry.
May 5th, May 18th, and May 19th.
Or whatever, they're also in the drive for the meeting that we're gonna go to. So we have May 5th,
And May 19th.
and then we also have May 19th workshop ones with the city council. They adopted them last night, but.
Mhm. So have any of you read these minutes?
I looked through them.
Okay,
Oh.
any concerns, questions?
No.
Okay, we need to approve the minutes of May 5th Planning Commission meeting. Have a met on May 19th with their changes. I need a motion for that.
I'll make that motion also.
Second.
Okay, Jeff moved that we approve the minutes of May 5th and May 19th. And who seconded it? Dwight seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great.
Jeff is just jumping.
Scott, any follow-up from
7:30.
the previous meetings?
Yeah, so last night, city council, they heard the moderate income housing amendment item and adopted that amendment as proposed. So they wanted to pass along their gratitude for your guys' consideration and hard work on that. I know a couple of council members also wanted to extend that to you guys. Councilmember Schmidt as well was grateful for the work you guys did. So that is behind us, so to speak. The general plan will be updated and we need to submit a report to the state on our moderate income housing efforts this past year. So that's on my task list to submit before October 1st. But then that kind of frees us up from that topic and we can go on to other things and start implementing the moderate income housing plan through 2023. So just an FYI on that.
City council was okay with the modifications that we suggested.
Yeah, they were very happy about the suggestions, especially that some of the efforts were tied to water and water availability and our ability to serve that density that we may look into identifying next year. So that was something that they thought was a good idea. So yeah, that's I think the only follow-up I have for you guys.
Great. Okay. Well, then let's move on to item number 1, discussion regarding North Logan City signage ordinance. Scott.
Okay, so just as the agenda says, this is a work session, and just I'm not sure how you guys have done this in the past. Generally with work sessions or work items, however you guys have termed these things, where we don't have any action, we're just talking through a topic, getting ideas out on the table, getting feedback, and crafting as we go. Basically, I don't expect you guys to have everything memorized. What we throw in the drive may be working documents, in various stages of completion or proposal. So when we have workshop items, my preference is that we come to the table just prepared to talk about it. You just don't have to read through everything and memorize everything. It's generally where we begin discussing a topic. No action is intended. Feedback would be great. Obviously, that's why we're here to discuss and get feedback. But Commissioner Erickson had mentioned, hey, I didn't read all of this, and I don't expect you to. So don't feel bad if you didn't read it before the meeting. Okay. So what this topic is about, the signage ordinance kind of directs all new signage in the city, obviously. And we've had a couple of businesses that are kind of looking at the city, economic development wise, who have mentioned, hey, there's a few things in the signage ordinance that we're having a hard time with. We're not sure why it is the way that it is. And we're not sure if we like the idea of moving into a city that we can't show, signage for our business. So what I'd like to do is kind of run you through some notes that I have. We'll also look at the ordinance itself. And I printed out the ordinance and highlighted some sections that I want to kind of educate everybody on before we discuss, so we can kind of discuss with a general understanding of what is even in the ordinance, and then we can go from there. I'd also like to do a little bit of a virtual site visit or field trip, if you will, of our main street and some signs that are existing. But you'll notice I printed out 2 documents for you. One's a little bit thicker. This is the actual signage ordinance. I added line numbers and page numbers just so we can quickly reference where we're all wanting to look and read, so we can stay on the same page together. The other packet is just some random notes. Okay, not a beautiful document, but just some notes that I pasted all together so we can kind of read through a few things. But I'm going to jump into Google Earth here. We got a bit of a lag between my screen and your screens. Wonder how this will work.
What kind of businesses have brought this issue to our attention?
So these are new businesses that are not currently in our community. We don't typically talk about, economic development business openly as they're doing site selection. It's one of those things where when they're ready to let people know that they're coming to town, then they will do so. But in the interest of the city, and also for those doing or hoping to do business, we like to keep those business names somewhat confidential. But regardless, we've had a few businesses, I think, have some questions about our existing, sorry, I'm trying to get mine here, our existing signage ordinance. I got some lag. Wonder how well this will work with how quick things move here.
What's that?
What's the lines part?
I'll give it a minute to catch up.
Yeah. In Hyde Park. By Hyde Park.
Oh, it's the one that's,
See right there?
if you, yeah, there's a lower and upper section of that part too.
Okay, well, we're letting that lag catch up. If you don't mind turning your attention to the bigger packet, the actual ordinance, we'll just start on page 1, the bottom, that first highlight. So what we're talking about is what's classified as a freestanding business sign. Okay, so a freestanding business sign is a sign that is not attached to the building. It's not above or in front of the building. It's actually out in front in the setback area. So kind of out on the main street or their front yard setback area. What you'll see, we're kind of on Main Street between Walmart and Kohl's. You'll see, I'm going to turn around here. You'll notice two signs. We have this bank sign. This is what we classify a pole sign. This is kind of an older style sign. And then the Walmart sign you can kind of see back here. You see my mouse on there? Oh, it's such a lag. There we go. Walmart's also on a pole sign out there in the distance. Can you see that? Okay. And if we turn around, one of the more modern and compliant signs is the Cole sign, which is what we call a monument sign. These are all freestanding signs. They're just different, whether they're pole signs or monument signs. The current language in our ordinance does not allow for pole signs, just so everybody's aware, those are no longer allowed. So anybody coming in asking for a signage permit, we would say no to a pole sign. Okay. I'm going to drive down the street here a little bit closer to Cole's. Okay, so the Cole sign is a monument sign, and it does have some electronic messaging at the bottom, which we do allow a little bit of that, but not much because it can get out of control. If we go further down Main here, we'll see a couple of signs that are older signs. Okay, so Sweeto Burrito on a pole as well. Cow Ranch on a pole. And if we were to drive down Main Street, you would notice Cow Ranch is actually the tallest pole sign that we have. And then we've got Jack's Tire and Oil off to the left here.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
Okay,
That's
So-
Logan, isn't it?
It's
that
Jack.
is over in Logan. That's right. On Main Street, I guess I should
anyway,
say.
yeah.
North Logan on the right-hand side,
I get
Logan on
what
the
you mean.
left-hand side. Yep. So the Cow Ranch sign, this has actually been there for a long time. This used to be the Super K Kmart sign. And if you go back in the history on Google Earth, you can actually see an old picture of the old Kmart sign. But that's one sign that is what we call legally non-conforming. So it was established, it was a legal sign back in the 80s or 90s or whenever that sign was installed. And it has remained since. And it's allowed to change its face so they can install the typeface based on whoever's using the sign. But they're not allowed to alter the structure or move it or expand the signage. That's all what we call legally non-conforming. It can remain, they can maintain it, they can paint it, they can keep it safe and operate in operation, but they cannot change it unless they bring it into conformance with our ordinance. And bringing it into conformance is like the Cole sign, changing it from a pole sign down to a monument sign. Okay. So if you look at the bottom of that first page, line 28 in that first table, freestanding business signs. Height, width, and size of signs face regulated based on the zone in which the sign is to be located. Second sentence, one freestanding business sign allowed per lot or complex or project. Multi-tenant projects are only allowed one business sign for the entire project. Okay, freestanding business signs may be located in the setback area but not project into or over the public right of way. So it can be within what we call the front yard setback. So behind the sidewalk on their property, they can put that. It can't arc over into the roadway, the right of way. Okay. Signs cannot be placed in any corners sight distance triangle. So the corner is basically saying this driveway, there's a corner on the far end and there's a corner on the near end, and there's what we call a sight distance triangle where we don't want to put anything in this area so that traffic can actually see oncoming traffic as they pull out into the lane and not get hit. So if, for example, Cal wanted to replace their sign, we would say, okay, but you can't put it right on the corner, right? Come on, lag, right there. Can't put it there. You've got to move it back so that sight distance is remained open and visible. So it's a safety issue. Okay. And then lastly, in this freestanding business sign, the last thing that's highlighted is it must be monument style. So that's where we're saying we can't have any pole signs anymore. It has to be a monument sign going forward. And generally speaking, when you look at a community that does have only monument signs, the aesthetics are better. There's not as much overhead clutter. It's kind of the whole thought process behind power lines above head. Generally speaking, let's put them underground and keep that, a nice aerial visual obstruction out of our line of sight. Let's try to keep that clutter nice and neat and tidy underground. So that's kind of the same idea with these pole signs. Typically, that's what, the direction of signage ordinances have been going as we modernize our urban areas. Let's reduce the clutter. Okay, so that's a current requirement for any new freestanding business signs. Okay, let's flip through to page in the same packet here.
Do we have standards for the monument style sign?
We do. Yeah, we'll get there. I'll show you what that looks like here. Page number 6. Just below line 38, that next highlighted area. You guys see that? Free, so this is the sign permit table. It tells you whether or not you have to get a permit for each type of sign. What it's basically saying here is any freestanding business sign has to have a permit. And it also requires that it be inspected. Generally, these are larger structures and we want to make sure they're safe, not going to topple over in a windstorm, those types of things. So anybody wants a new sign has to get a permit, has to be inspected before it can be approved. Okay, let's flip forward, page 7. The definition, so this is line 71. The definition of a freestanding business sign. Sign mounted on the ground as opposed to being mounted on a building that directs attention to a business or profession conducted, or to a commodity or a service sold, offered or manufactured, or to an entertainment offered on the premises where the sign is located. So kind of self-explanatory there, right? Mounted on the ground as opposed to being on the building itself. Now we have other sign allowances where you can have a sign on the facade of a building. You can have both. But this is the definition of a freestanding business sign, okay? Let's move on to page 8. We're gonna skip number 14, the directory sign for now. We might come back to that, but at the bottom, line 114, number 28, monument style sign. So the definition of a monument style sign is style of freestanding business sign such that it has a base attached to the ground on which the face is the sign. On which the face of the sign is constructed and or attached, and where the advertising portion of the sign is incorporated into the base. So it's kind of really trying to be specific. There's no poles associated with this style of a sign, right? Monument style signs do not use poles to hold the advertising face of the sign. So when we looked at that Cole sign, it was obvious that the base and the sign face were all integrated into a single unit lower to the ground. Okay, let's move on. Page 11. This is where we're talking about permanent signs, all different types of permanent signs. So item A, line 200, regulations on existing permanent and community support facility signs. So what we're saying is any existing permanent sign, continued use of existing signs, all existing permanent signs that did not meet the requirements of the previous sign ordinance and were existing at the time of the passing of this ordinance are allowed to continue in use, subject to the section below. So we're saying that anything that was there before this ordinance went into effect is grandfathered, legally non-conforming, can remain, okay? Hop down to B, line 207, regulations on permanent signs based on type of construction or sign placement. So we're gonna get into item 1 on line 208, freestanding business signs. Freestanding business signs and community support facilities shall be regulated and limited in accordance with the following table. So the first box in the table, bottom of page 11, maximum height of top of sign above the ground and maximum width of sign. So on these freestanding business signs, we are saying they cannot be any taller than 12 feet, they cannot be any wider than 12 feet, and they cannot be any larger than 120 square feet. So if you kind of read between the lines here, we're saying you can have a sign that's 10 by 12. It can't be 12 by 12, even though we'll give you 12 wide, 12 high. You got to kind of play with that. You have 120 square feet. Okay. One thing I was looking at this cow ranch sign, for example, not only is it a pole sign, but the face of the sign is too big as well. So it's non-conforming in multiple ways. Just to give you an example of a sign that is existing in our community that is non-conforming, but was there prior to this ordinance. Okay. Let's flip over a page to page 12, line 20, or 220, sorry. So this is getting a little bit more specific about these types of signs. It says, for single or master planned projects encompassing more than one legally existing lot, only one freestanding business sign is permitted for the project, no matter how many lots exist. So we're basically saying if it's a big project and it's, multifaceted, you still just get one sign because it's still kind of inclusive. There may be multiple lots that are split up, but it's a master plan project. It's all integrated. You get one sign is what it's saying there. Okay. For projects of more than 2.5 acres with multiple street frontages and a street frontage of more than 300 linear feet, the city may approve a freestanding sign on each street frontage. So if it's a big project on a corner intersection and they've got long frontages, we might give them 2 signs, one on either frontage of the corner. Okay, a corner freestanding sign with 2 sign faces shall count as a single sign in a setting. Okay. If a project is a multi-tenant shopping complex and there are approved pads for development immediately adjoining a street frontage, the pad tenants may have only one freestanding sign each. So in that sentence, what we're getting to, I'm going to hop into our GIS. You can see parcel lines. As an example, IFA has that new soda shop going in on a pad on the corner, right? So that's an example we can look at as to what it is describing here. So let's zoom in. Get my bearings here. Here we go. Okay, so here's the IFA building, right? They just subdivided off this pad. So this is its own lot. It's its own pad. There's new business going in. What this language is saying is that the pad, business on the pad can have its own sign. So on their frontage and on Main Street, they can have their own monument sign out front for that soda shop. Okay. The IFA is another business and they've got a call center off to the side. Right. So there's actually 2 businesses sharing this large structure, but they're all in the same structure. They're all in the same lot. What our ordinance is saying is this is multi-tenant. They are only allowed to have one street sign out front, even though there's more than one tenant in that structure. Okay. And then if we read on line 225, it says ladder signs identifying all project tenants shall not be permitted. So a ladder sign, let me give you guys an example of what that is. Oops, that's not the one I wanted. Notes. This is in your second packet, by the way, if you want to follow along on the hard copy. On the second page, I pulled a couple of examples locally of some ladder signs that you are probably familiar with. So on the left, we've got the Macy's down in Providence. This is a ladder sign. We have multiple tenants on a ladder sharing that sign face. This is the ladder sign in front of Taco Bell and Walmart here in North Logan. That's a ladder sign. Both of these signs would not be permitted under our existing ordinance because there's more than one tenant sharing that sign face. We're saying that that can't be allowed. Okay, so this one in North Logan is technically legally non-conforming. We would not permit this going forward based on that language we have. Okay, if we continue reading that same sentence, it says ladder signs identifying all project tenants shall not be permitted. Instead, these would supplement by use of individual business signs located on the building or directory signs. So instead of having this sign out front, we would expect for them to just have a sign on their frontage of their building. So if we actually go back to Google Earth and we look, now we'd have to go back a bit. I'm not sure. See how fast this goes. It's funny.
But they were there, yeah. I don't think sweet.
Okay, here's that sign. You see it right there? This is the same sign that we're using as an example. We're saying this cannot be in under the current ordinance. What we would expect instead of them having this sign out front is we would say, you guys have these signs on your facades, and that is what is permissible. Sorry, wait for the lag, wait for the lag.
So how did they get that built?
So Marco's Pizza has their building sign, Cricket, Smoke Shop, Sally Beauty, I forget what's here, the Jungle. Anyways, we're saying that this sign is not permissible, but these frontage signs are.
So how did they get that built then if it wasn't
This is pre-existing, so this is a legally non-conforming sign. This
grandfathered in now?
grandfathered in. They can change the typeface on these now. So if a new tenant moves in, they can change that. But what we're saying going forward is we would prefer that we not have as much clutter out on the frontage of Main. We'd like to say you guys can have one monument sign for a primary tenant on the property, not all of these tenants. Okay, that's what the current language says.
So you can't figure out what's in there. The current.
Okay. What instead it's saying is we would say, instead of having that ladder sign, you can have these frontage signs, these facade signs, and you can have a directory sign. But let's go back a couple pages in the ordinance. We skipped over the definition of that. This is back on page 8, I believe. Line number 86, number 14, directory sign. So the definition of a directory sign is a sign listing the tenants or occupants of a building or group of buildings, and that may indicate their respective professions or business activities on the premises. May be no larger than 20 square feet in sign face area to be defined as a directory sign and thus not be regulated. And then if we go further down, it's basically saying these directory signs need to be on the facade of a building or within a closer proximity. Within 15 feet is what we'll read further down. So instead of having this sign out on the street, you can have your building facing signs, or you can have a directory sign instead. And the directory sign, an example of that is like these guys here. They're supposed to be closer into the buildings, no greater than 15 feet away from a building. So this one's actually on the facade of a building. This one's in the parking lot, but not out on the frontage. It's close into the structure that it's meant to direct people to the locales or the tenants on it in a bigger building. Okay.
So there's really not much difference between a ladder sign
And a directory
sign.
Except for it's not
Except
as
for
visible on
location.
Main Street, and it's much smaller. Location and size is much different.
The directory signs aren't out on the,
Yep,
So,
they're
I
not
mean,
out on Main
that's-
Street.
that maybe affects people's interests for advertising. Is
Correct.
that
Yeah.
the-
Okay, I'm just trying to wrap everybody's heads around the issue before we dive into what we might want to consider for changes, if any. Okay, let's jump forward to page 17 of the ordinance, line 433. So these are the sign design standards, permits and inspections, talking about miscellaneous design standards for signs, multi-tenant projects. So getting back to that multi-tenant, okay? Signs in a multi-tenant project, such as a shopping center or office complexes, shall comply with the following. Freestanding business signs and wall signs shall have a uniform or complementary background in terms of color, illumination, material, and fabrication. All freestanding signs and their supporting structures shall be of the same background color and material unless the background color is a component of a registered trademark. Okay, let's stop there. I'm going to show you an example of what it's trying to say here. If you go back to the notes, and go down and look at this example here. I think we can all agree this is a bit chaotic and a bit busy and a lot to look at, right?
It really is.
Right,
I
so
never
what this
thought about it.
language here is trying to say is, hey, let's have a similar background color instead of white, blue, and black. Let's have a similar background color unless the background color is a component of a registered trademark. So
Be off.
that's where it gets tricky. Maybe Big Five, their trademark is a blue background. I don't know for sure, but maybe it is. That's where it's hard because you have businesses come in with very trademarked colors, color schemes, logos, where that's how they stand themselves out. That's what people
Mhm.
recognize them as, right? But what we're saying is, if possible, like South Fork Hardware, for example, maybe they don't have a trademark and we're going to say, okay, we want you to be blue because we want for this sign not to be as crazy as it is. Number one, the sign wouldn't be permissible because it's above ground on poles, but even if it were on a monument, we want to make sure that it's not busy. Okay. Let's see, the last sentence of this, so 436, line 436, all outdoor and exterior directory signs, except those that are the primary sign for a multi-tenant project, shall be located within 15 feet of the principal entry to the building. So again, going back to these directory signs, these have to be close into the structure. So it's almost like you go to a doctor's office and there's a whole bunch of them, right? You can have a single monument sign out front that says whatever medical complex. But then once you get into the complex, this would then further direct you to the specific doctor's office or dentist's office or whoever you're going to see. So for example, the new medical building across from the specialty hospital,
I don't think there's room in that parking lot. for a
that's
directory.
another topic of discussion, but they would do well to have one of these. I think they actually
Yeah.
do have one of these directory signs on the facade, just so when you get to the building, it's like, okay, am I going to the second floor, third floor? But to get you to the building, we would expect you to have a single monument out front saying, this is the medical complex you're looking for. You get into the parking lot, you get out, you go to the building, you say, okay, now this is the doctor's office I'm looking for. It's trying to cut down on the clutter that is visible from the roadway until you get in close to the building. Then you see all the doctors' names and offices and which locale you're trying to actually get into.
And they have that on the medical complex on 14th North.
Yeah, that one's, yep.
They just have local medical center and then.
Yep,
inside.
great example. Okay, let's jump forward to our non-conforming language, which is on page 19. So page 18 into 19. So this is section 12C as in Charlie -609. And then if you flip over to page 19, this is where our language exists that governs non-conforming signs. So anything that is existing, non-conforming, legal, what can they and what can't they do? So beginning on line 476, permanent signs existing at the time of this sign ordinance was revised. So back in 2002 is when we last revised this ordinance, and which are not in compliance with provisions of this sign ordinance, including billboards, shall be deemed, sorry, excluding billboards. They have a totally separate legal system with billboards. So just don't think about those for now. We're saying that if they did not comply with this ordinance at the time that it was adopted, they shall be deemed non-conforming signs. On the happening of any of the events described below, or where any of the following conditions apply, any non-conforming sign or signs shall be brought into compliance and a new permit shall be secured therefore, or the sign shall be removed. Then it gives us a list of A through H of these occurrences. If they were to happen, they actually have to bring their sign into compliance. So A, the cost of conforming the sign is valued at less than $100. What it's basically saying is when they passed this ordinance back in 2002, if you could make your sign compliant for $100, then we would expect you to just go ahead and do that. But if not, then it can remain non-conforming as a legally non-conforming sign. Okay. B, when a non-conforming sign is destroyed or damaged to an extent in excess of 50% of the sign value. So if your sign gets taken out on a snowy night, somebody runs off the road and it takes it out, we'd say, okay, sorry, it's time. It must be the time that you need to replace your sign. You know, some higher power said it was time to take your sign out and replace it with a conforming sign. C, the sign is relocated in any manner. So if you're going to pick it up and move it, we expect you to replace it with a conforming sign at that point. D, the changing of panels in a sign or changeable copy shall not be reason for requiring the removal of a non-conforming sign, but a sign shall be required to make conforming if it is otherwise altered structurally. So that's where people can change out the sign face with the new tenant, and that's fine. But they cannot alter it structurally. So they can't make it bigger. They can't change it, you know, the size or configuration. They need to work with what they've got. If they want to change it, great. Let's make it conforming and put in whatever you want that conforms. Okay. E, if the business or service for which the non-conforming sign or signs triggers a conditional use review or other type of development review and approval as required by the code, as a result of expansion, change of use, or other reason, you would have to change your sign. So if somebody wants to move into a building and the land use is a conditional use, it's not allowed, permitted by right, then we would say, in addition to your conditional use permit, you have to change out your sign to make it conforming. Okay. F, nothing in this section shall be deemed to prohibit the city from requiring the removal of a billboard in accordance with Utah code. Again, they are regulated totally separately from other types of signs. G, any non-conforming permanent signs not meeting any of the above criteria that would require the sign to be brought into compliance shall be deemed legal non-conforming signs and may remain in place as is. So we've talked about that. Leave it be grandfathered and we won't bug you about it. Okay, lastly, nothing in this section shall be construed to relieve the owner of a non-conforming sign or owner of the property on which such non-conforming sign is located from maintaining a sign in a state of good repair, provided however, that any repainting, cleaning, and other normal maintenance or repair of the sign or sign structure shall not modify the sign structure or copy in any way which makes it more non-conforming. So we're saying we still expect you to maintain your sign if you're going to keep a non-conforming sign. Make sure it's safe, make sure it doesn't, become dilapidated. But if you're going to change it, it has to become more conforming. Okay. And then lastly, routine maintenance or changing like parts shall not be considered an alteration, provided that such change does not alter the surface dimension, height, or height message, or otherwise make the sign non-conforming. So you can maintain a sign, you can keep it painted, you can keep it safe, but just about everything else requires you to change it, and make it conforming. Long story short, okay? So I just wanted to get through that, bring everybody up to speed as to what is a freestanding business sign, what are they allowed to do with it, what are they not allowed to do with it, and how do we regulate new signs if they were to be requested, okay? The question that these businesses are running into or that are asking us is, let's use this Walmart sign as an example. So Walmart's got this existing pole sign, right? Legally non-conforming because we don't allow pole signs. Walmart has, they're quite far back. They're not as close to the road. They actually have a couple of businesses inside of Walmart. They've got a credit union. They've got a Subway. I think there's a Build-A-Bear in there now.
An eye doctor.
Yeah. What we're saying is, hey, you can't put those signs on this pole. You can put it on the facade of the building and that's it. Okay. We've had some businesses look at that requirement and say, well, not only can we not use the existing sign structure, but we can't even put our sign on that structure if we wanted to. Your code doesn't allow it. And this is just an example. Down the road, the Cal Ranch sign is another one where Cal Ranch occupies the majority of that building, but there's still quite a bit of room that they may want to lease to other businesses. And that's again a legally non-conforming sign existing, looks just fine, perfectly functional, but we're saying that they cannot modify that in any way unless they tear it out and put in a new monument sign down at no higher than 12 feet. And that doesn't have a pole. So here's Cal Ranch again. So Cal Ranch, I think, is looking to lease some of their space to other, businesses. They occupy that building there, but there's some room on this other side, I believe, that they could rent out to a couple other businesses. And there's not a lot of visibility. We've got Sweeto Burrito up front. We've got this bank here. There's really not a lot of visibility if we were to allow them to put just a sign on the sign face or on their facade face. So one of the things we're looking at is, would there be support for a modification to our signage ordinance that would allow for perhaps a legally non-conforming sign such as this to add a sign to the existing pole to advertise for those buildings, multi-tenants on those buildings behind, whereas at the moment we don't. One thing I wanted to talk about with this idea of co-location is, in most ordinances for cell phone towers, there's a requirement that cell phone companies co-locate on existing towers. So we maximize the usage of existing towers before we permit new towers. We actually require that when they build a new tower, they oversize it for capacity's sake so we can add more to that before we open up more tower availability. I think that that's maybe an idea we could explore with this signage question of, instead of having, for example, a lot of signs along Main Street, whether they're monument signs or otherwise, it might be worth looking into allowing co-location. Even though the signs are non-conforming, we would like for them to all conform and get down to a monument sign at some point. But maybe for the time being, we allow for some signs to be added onto an existing sign to give them that visibility. It can be a slippery slope if, for example, we open up this door where technically we're trying to bring things into compliance. The code is written in a way to say, don't make any changes, use it as it is, but when you want to change it, let's bring it into conformity so we have uniform signage throughout the city. It brings up that aesthetic appeal. Okay. So think on that idea for a second. I want to take you to another part of town, and don't cringe when I show it to you, but the south end of Logan. I'm not saying there's anything cringeworthy about Logan, but it's not us. At the Y intersection, obviously there's new development going in down there, and they have actually installed signage in a way that I think merits at least a look. So we're gonna look right here. So this is kind of by the Walmart on the south end. So we've got a lot of signs here that obviously are older. And I looked at the Logan City signage ordinance. They still allow for pole signs. It's not that they're prohibiting pole signs, but their pole sign allowance is much smaller. Their square footage, I think, is only like 65 square feet on a pole. Whereas for us, it's double, it's 120. So this Walmart sign, that's a monument sign. That's actually conforming with our signage ordinance. Get this to catch up here. There we go. So that's conforming. Go further down to the truck ranch. They also installed a monument sign. And they had the option of using a pole sign, but they chose a monument sign just as an FYI. Get down here a little bit more. So there's their monument sign right here. Sorry, this is hard to see. There we go. So there's their monument. They're also allowed a facade sign, so they took advantage of both opportunities. The other part of town I wanted to show you is on the other side of the Y. Right here. So this is over by that Grease Monkey and the Carl's Jr., the other side of the Walmart. So if we go down this street here. Get it to catch up.
Our signage guidelines wouldn't restrict the number of signs that they wanted to put up.
It does.
With, let me finish, with, say, a monument sign and then a sign on the building, that would not be permissible.
They can. They may have a monument sign. They may also have a facade sign. It limits them to one monument sign and one facade sign per facade face. So on, for example, the new Swig, the soda shop over there by IFA, they were just approved for a sign permit with one facade sign on one side of the building and one facade sign on the other side of the building. They could have had a monument sign, but they did not request one. So they were approved for just the one. So here's the other side of town. Here's Walmart's other monument, not on a pole. I think it looks cleaner than pole signs. I might be open for interpretation. If I can get this guy to go around the corner. I'm sorry, there's a lot of lag. I'm trying to be a smooth driver, but you're probably getting car sick. Okay, so here's when you round that corner, there's a monument sign here for Taco Bell. So they don't have that on a pole, just a monument there. Oh, come on. Okay. Okay, that's where this is really slow, so I'm just gonna skip you the misery of going through and waiting for the lag. But long story short, I do think that monument signs are that more modern, clean look, and I think that that's what our code is trying to get to. However, I think that there's also a concern I think it's a valid concern with some of these businesses that there's just no visibility, and our code doesn't allow for them to get a sign into a visible location, given the fact that they're a multi-tenant building. They're pretty far removed from the frontage of the roadway, so their facade facing signs are really not going to catch any visibility whatsoever from the road. Let me go back to this end of town. And let's look and kind of talk about that idea of potentially co-locating. And let's go back to, let's go back to Cal Ranch.
A third of that building's empty.
Yeah.
And I think they should have it.
I do too. I think I'll be able to announce their businesses there. On
Looks changed.
that sign as well.
Okay, we'll let this load up, and then let's go back to the Cal Ranch sign and kind of use that as our visual guide and kind of talk through this idea of co-location.
As you're getting there, is the main concern is we aren't getting businesses because they don't want to locate in a place they can't have signage. And maybe in the past, we've talked about needing businesses to come in.
Yeah.
But then we're not getting businesses because of potentially a signage problem. Is that?
Yeah, I
concern?
think that's definitely a component. I don't think, I mean, obviously that's real estate is so multifaceted, and demand and location is not just signage based. It's traffic, it's, what is in the vicinity, it's rooftops within a certain number of, miles of a location. There's so many factors, but we have specifically gotten feedback from businesses who are actively looking to locate in North Logan that have identified this as a sticky point, saying, hey, we wouldn't mind being there, but we are concerned about not having any visibility. And the signage is a question that they brought up. And then that kind of comes back to this chicken and an egg thing, where we want to attract business. It makes for a healthy community to have, a healthy amount of business. But also we want aesthetics, what do we bend on? Do we bring in the businesses and then we kind of hammer down a little bit more on aesthetics as we get more established businesses in place, and we're not scaring anybody off? There's that dilemma. What I've also thought, and let me know your thoughts on this, is if we want to stick with the monument sign, which is what our code currently allows, but allow for multi-tenant, so kind of going back to that ladder sign idea, but maybe limit its height and not let them get so tall, so ladder just keeps on going up and there's 20 businesses on a ladder that's 35, 40 feet tall. That's not what we want to do either. But if, for example, we were to allow a monument sign to replace, for example, this Cal Ranch, but allow for multi-tenant instead of right now where it says that you may not have multi-tenant ladder signs. That's an alternative maybe worth exploring, where we can get more businesses' names on these monument signs, but we get rid of the pole, we keep them lower to the ground. They still get the visibility. That might be maybe a compromise we could look into as well. So I guess 2 ideas on the table. Let me know if you guys have others, where we allow for these existing non-conforming pole signs to co-locate business signs on those poles, which means we have more visual clutter up in the air, but we have visibility for some of these businesses that are further off the road. Or perhaps we look into changing the monument sign to allow for multi-tenant, but keeping the size standards the same, so they can't get any taller than 12 feet, no wider than 12 feet. But you can put more than one business on the sign. Or the other alternative, I guess, is that we do nothing and we say our sign ordinance is the sign ordinance, and we'll attract the businesses that want to work within those existing parameters. That's an option as well. But this has been identified as, let's talk about it and see what we think.
So I think if I had a business that was going to co-locate with Cal Ranch, I'd certainly want to be able to advertise it.
Mhm.
I wouldn't, you can't start a business and not have any advertising happening. I think it would be crazy to have a pole sign and a monument sign right there. I think monument signs now look classier, but the pole sign's already there. So, and if you're driving down the road, it's certainly a lot easier to see a pole sign than a monument sign, but monument signs look better.
Mhm.
But I think if a business is going to come in and we already have the pole there, why not let them do something to advertise their business?
Yeah.
On the pole.
Is
I don't know if if they could get a conditional permit to do that, or,
We could certainly put some standards into the ordinance. So if, for example, we're interested in allowing for a pole sign to co-locate additional businesses, we could limit the amount of area of any new co-locations so that we don't get another sign that is the same size as this Cal Ranch right below it.
right,
And maybe we get something that's a quarter of that size below it. So take, for example, this picture and cut this into a quarter, right? The A and the L, maybe. Cut that square out and put it right below. Maybe that from a ratio standpoint is adequate. Maybe we want a little bit bigger, maybe a third. But again, we can write those standards in so it doesn't get out of control if we're interested in allowing for co-location. But we can also do the same with the monument signs. Maybe we say we allow your monument sign to be slightly bigger than the 12 by 12 if you're co-locating additional businesses.
Are we,
Mhm.
I'm like, probably all of us, I think we believe that we should be able to advertise businesses. If I were building a city, I would want everyone to have monument, everything looks aesthetically appealing.
Nice and pretty,
It's
yep.
beautiful. But we're
Wow.
not from scratch. We're not like, oh, this is so perfect. And everyone has the same color and it's boring.
Yeah.
But also really nice looking. I personally don't have a problem with people advertising just because I want us to be able to promote businesses. But I guess my question here is, are we able to do a couple adjustments? So we could make an adjustment to the monument style and the pole.
Sure. So they pick their poison.
So if Cal Ranch, or another business said, hey, well, I only have Kohl's has one sign, but now there's the pickleball and they want to have a few more things added, then we would allow for that.
Yeah.
Is that
Technically,
what we're,
Yeah. So that's a good example. The Kohl's sign, if you go and drive past that right now, they've got the Kohl's banner. They've got a smaller one for the pickler. So
Mhm.
technically that's a ladder sign. That's non-conforming. They're not supposed to do that.
yeah.
And then they have a small little message board below. And they are actually allowed to have a small message board. So that's not out of compliance. But the pickler technically is not supposed to be on that sign if we were to follow the letter of the ordinance. But it's a monument sign. Arguably, it looks better than a pole sign and it has multi-tenant. Maybe that's an example of what we might be okay with.
Do people feel strongly about not allowing multiple?
That's what I was going to bring up, the same point. Why not both? I don't know that you'd want to extend this or expand the size of the monument sign requirements, but allow for multiple tenants.
Yeah. My
I would-
only concern is I don't want it to turn into this sign.
This is awful.
Oh, I love it.
Right? This, I think, is an example of what we don't
So can we
want.
not do that? But the Macy's one's nicer looking. I think
Yeah.
the Macy's ladder signage is nicer looking than that triple pole
Sure.
sign with big five and stuff. So you're right. I mean, I can see it getting away.
It gets, I mean, even the Macy's sign gets a bit busy with all of its colors and it just doesn't look very well coordinated from a design standpoint. No designer would say, let's put some green next to some light
It's-
blue next to some.
It still looks
But that's why
better.
people brand.
That's
Yeah,
true.
and it still looks better than that
Oh, you're
pole
a
sign, but I
brick
think it's
snob.
because the brick and stuff just makes it look classy.
Brick
It's-
snob.
So we require bricks with any ladder signs.
Yeah, I mean.
I
technically-
think,
Can you write that in?
I think it's fine to have a no pole ordinance now.
Mhm.
But like
Yeah.
with the Cal Ranch thing, it's already there.
Yeah.
Why not let, I mean, I don't think we should say, yeah, you can put 12 more poles up there. I
Mhm.
think you work with what you've got
Mhm.
and figure out a way if a business goes in there to let them. But I don't think, I'm fine. That's me. I'm fine with no, even though I can see pole signs better driving down the road.
Mhm.
I'm fine to have an ordinance that says no more pole signs, but if we have businesses that come in, I think it's kind of crazy for us to say, no, you can't advertise your business on this pole.
Yeah. What would happen if, let's say we go down that road and we say, okay, you guys can co-locate on this Cal Ranch sign. I would want to put in a limitation. So as I'm looking at ratios, I think from a ratio perspective, maybe not just a pure square footage, but maybe a ratio plus a square footage cap. what maybe would make sense, given the size of the existing cow ranch and how high up in the air it is, maybe we would limit the additional co-location to no larger than a third.
Yeah.
So if you kind of look at that and kind of cut this into 3 ribbons,
Mhm.
Yeah.
halfway through the C and the A, maybe that would be, add that to the bottom. That doesn't seem out of ratio.
Mhm.
Let's make it the ratio of the building that they occupy.
There are signage ordinances that do that.
Yeah, that way it's easy to justify and it's easy to know, it's easy to understand. The big chains that are the main staple for that should have the visibility.
Yeah. And that's something that we actually see a lot in ordinances, but it is tied to the facade size sign.
Mm.
So
Oh,
what's hard is, so for example, Cow Ranch, their facade is so many feet wide, so many feet tall, square footage wise, we can do that calculation and say, okay, maybe you get 10% of that as a sign, but it goes really deep and that could be a really big building. And if you allow them to have a sign based on the square footage of their building, it might get out of hand. What I would maybe think is appropriate, since we're looking at an existing non-conforming sign, is keep the ratio correlated with the existing sign size.
I think so.
It's
That
an
makes
idea.
sense.
For facade size, I think that the building size, to make the sign actually fit well on the building size, yeah, that ratio I think makes sense.
Yeah. But on the pole, I think we could work with it, and make it look aesthetically nice. And we can't have 25 more businesses add signs to that pole, but I don't think 25 more businesses will be in that building.
Yeah, so maybe what we do is we say you may have co-location, an additional sign up to a third of the size of the existing sign. And that the co-location, the sum of all the co-located signs not exceed the existing sign in place today. So basically what that would do is it would allow this to double in size. You'd have 3 more signs below that would encompass about this area.
Okay.
I don't know. That's an idea. Is that getting too big?
Mhm.
Maybe we should say a quarter, third,
I like third.
third. Okay.
Like we might as well bring on the color. It's gonna be cute.
Okay. One other thing, if we do that, write that into code and somebody's interested in doing so, we're adding a lot more surface area to a sign. And when you
Okay.
look at the engineering of a sign, it's actually,
Has to be engineered.
yeah, it has to be engineered.
Right.
It's like putting a sail out on a sailboat. You're going to catch a
Mhm.
lot more
Right.
wind. And right now, our ordinance
Yeah.
says that you cannot structurally alter a non-conforming sign.
With
Otherwise, it
that.
has to be conforming. So we would have to kind of poke at that language to allow for the engineering to be revised and structurally updated to allow for that co-location to occur.
Okay, this is a silly question probably.
Mhm.
But is there a way to put in that the signs just have to be approved that based
No.
on each sign, or does that get so sticky?
Well,
It
because how do you,
gets
that isn't
subjective.
fair.
Because you might
the-
not like it.
Well, exactly,
It's
because I love
subjective.
chain link, but some people don't. So,
You're
and
like-
I honestly like pole signs. So,
I mean, yeah, we like this.
so you can't have it that it's subject to
What we
Yeah.
think.
5 people, because
Okay,
I'll just
that's
wait
fine.
till you're
But
all
we
out and then I'll
need-
put my pole sign in.
But we need the regulation there. Yes.
It's just gotta, we
That's why
gotta,
we have the full sign.
they've gotta
ordinance.
be able to know what the target is. And so we have to define.
Give
that
them
and not
that
leave it
box.
Otherwise,
subjective.
Scott, what would a business do? If a business comes in to Cal Ranch, how would they advertise?
Could they just cut that?
They,
But-
No, if we
So,
just let the code exactly how it is,
They could-
how would that business advertise?
they would be limited to their facade.
Facade.
Yeah, just
And the facade is hidden by these buildings that are in front of it.
Right, right. So that's not fair.
That's
I
hard
mean,
for them.
it's fair, not,
We're all
but
about
that's not good for that
fair.
business.
Then we've got square footage that's unoccupied. We've got parking lot that's unutilized. You know,
Yeah.
it's just a waste of commercial space.
Right.
So
So we have to compromise, I think, and let them advertise in a good
Yeah.
aesthetically looking, safe way, but.
Yeah.
good luck with
Okay.
that.
would you guys also like to allow for the monument sign to change so we can give them that option to come into conformance with the monument co-location? Or we leave the monument be, so anything new coming in cannot co-locate on a monument?
I don't have a problem with the monument as long as it looks clean and nice.
I
Gotta
want to,
define it. Clean
Yeah.
and nice, got to be defined.
Yeah.
We can't have any more city ordinance
We-
or city center ordinance codes.
We-
So my thoughts on this, well, you already know about pole signs. I'm okay with them. I do think that we need to consider the business friendly aspect.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
15 years from now, sign poles are going to be cool again.
Right.
And we're all going to be like, we need to have the modern look with poles.
That's true.
It really is true. And so I think we get caught up on this and we just have to be careful.
Yeah.
And we need to, this is just my opinion, but I do think we need to be business friendly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, for the business and the consumer, have you driven around when they've got the dumb directory signs up on the building and you're driving through these complexes and you're trying to find a branded store that you know the logo,
Mhm.
but you're looking up here and everything's in gold writing. And I think the ladder signs, I think they're great.
Yeah. Are you poking fun at Park City by chance?
Possibly. So
I think
we're not, but that's not who we are. And
Sure.
I've never driven down Main Street and went, oh my gosh, that subway sign. I can't believe I live here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No one cares.
Yeah, because then you just know Subway's there.
Right.
They're
Well,
branded.
absolutely.
They
And
don't
I'm like,
make 'em
oh,
black and white with
right.
their
I get
green
my
and yellow.
$3 cold cut today.
so.
So that's where I'm at. I really do think reading this, and I hadn't, I've glanced through it, but some of this tonight as we were reading it, I've cringed because I just don't think it's business friendly.
Sure.
And I don't think, but letting some sign poles or in this case, modifications to poles is going to deteriorate the city. I'd rather have the buildings full.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're saying.
I think on both, right? Both the
Let's
pole
work-
and the monument needs.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
work with
I
the
agree.
business
Both.
and come up with some regulations that make sense.
I do want to consider language in there about tenant improvements, though. I think, and maybe co-locating is the new fancy
word.
word for tenant improvement, but Cole's building's got the pickler and there may even be some, I think there's something further
The old
south
bed and
that's
bath.
empty.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tenant improvement. And I think we should be able to
Adjust
to
that.
modify and stuff that's grandfathered in.
Yeah.
Now, a new pad, if we put something in down here next to Subway,
Mhm.
then I don't see that that's not a tenant improvement, and I
No.
don't see that as they need to
They
put
get
their own sign.
they get their own sign
I'm okay with
under our
it's a
language.
pole, but you
Yeah.
guys can say it's not.
So
But I do think we need to clarify in there about the tenant improvement thing, just so that it's really clear,
Okay.
unless everybody else understands what you mean by
sure.
co-locate or whatever.
Right. One thing that I've noticed, and this is maybe way down the road in our history as a city, I had an opportunity to go to an APA conference, American Planning Association, down in San Diego this last year. And my coworker and I from down in Weber, we had a layover in LA, and it was like a 2-hour layover just to get on a plane to hop over to San Diego. And we're like, that's silly. I don't want to sit in an airport, LAX of all airports, for 2 hours waiting for a 20-minute flight. So we actually left the airport, rented a car, and drove the PCH down to San Diego as an experience. And I actually learned something important there. When you go from one town to the next, it's interesting to see just how, one town, one jurisdictions, their ordinances and how they enforce them changes from one town to the next.
Oh, yeah.
2 things poked out to me. Well, 3. Signage ordinance, and if they are strict about it, makes a very clean, very attractive place. We're talking very, very nice places. And then you get into another part of town or a different jurisdiction, and you can tell it's totally different regulations, and it is a mess. I mean, just all sorts of clutter that is just visually distracting, and it's not an attractive place. And then you get into another part of town, and it changes, and you can kind of just see how one town to the next changes based on what they enforce with signage. So it's signage, lighting, and trees.
And art, and we've talked on landscaping.
Yep.
Main Street, and I think that's what we're working towards.
Yep.
Let's make it look like a clean, a place where this business wants to be.
Right. So in our history, maybe in the future, when we have, a nice, robust commercial base, I don't know when that would be or what point we say we've got, a nice, strong mix of commercial versus residential versus everything. maybe at a certain point we say, okay, now let's start to clean up some of these ordinances and let's get a more cohesive look and a more, so it's a kind of that chicken and an egg thing. Are we business friendly or are we trying to look at and pay attention to our aesthetics and everything else?
Mhm.
But those three things will make a very good looking town.
So I think
want both
if a
things.
business comes in and says, this is our problem, then we say, well, let's look at it and work together.
Yeah.
Because depending on what the business is, if we really want that business, then we can work with them because they need to be able to advertise. If we
But
don't
we
want
can't
that
say we don't
business,
want your
we
business,
can
so we're
work-
not gonna let you have a
no, we
sign
can't,
ordinance.
but that, you know what I'm saying? If they come in, let's be willing to look at it and work with them
Sure.
with
Okay.
what we've got
I
here.
think we need to loosen it up before.
So, and I agree. I think there's that chicken and egg thing. I think we're still
It's
on the
just a
end of
balance.
let's get
Yeah.
North Main more robust before we start doing anything different.
Yeah.
I think that the takeaway that I'm getting is let's look at the co-location. Let's put a cap so it doesn't get out of control. And then we'll leave the monument signs be. So any new signs that are coming in go through the monument. So we get that conformity going forward. And what I can do if that's the direction I feel like I'm getting, I can start putting pen to paper, come up with a red line proposal and show you in another meeting what changes I think would need to happen to allow that flexibility going forward.
Mhm.
That
Where,
sound
where
good?
are we currently at with ladders?
So ladders are not permitted.
Oh,
They're
I
so-
want to permit them.
I mean, I like them with the brick.
I think with ladders, it's very
Kinda
nice to
cute.
be able to see, but when you're driving down the road, you can't read what every little office number. So I think a ladder
that's a
needs to be
directory.
in, well,
Yeah,
That's a
that's,
directory.
that's true.
directory.
That's a directory.
The
You're right.
ladders.
the ladders is Macy's one.
It's branded with
Mhm.
brick.
with brick.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Scott,
Jeff.
you work
I
on it.
appreciate the
Jeff.
brick.
No, I
got it.
just, but I also think there's some cleanliness to that.
Mhm.
If you have an area that's got 7 or 8 businesses, why not have them in a one nice sign
Yeah.
rather
Instead
than
of
7
shotgunned all
monuments?
over.
Right.
So I would like to open up that discussion on the ladders.
Yeah, that would be less clutter, in my opinion.
I
It almost looks
agree,
nicer than-
but I think maybe a standard of the color or whatever, I think that's okay
Okay,
to talk about.
great. Well,
And
I think
I'm
I've got,
also a little concerned about, from a legal standpoint, what can we tell a landowner to do on their own property in terms of signage?
so we do have, as local government, we are charged with, the health, safety, welfare. And I think welfare is where that aesthetics kind of falls into that. There are pro property rights, property rights is one thing, but there's also a limitation on your neighbors and nuisance law as well
Right.
on neighboring properties. What we cannot do is we cannot limit speech. So signage, there's Supreme Court cases galore that are very specific about what we can limit as far as text and what we can't. But as far as our ability to govern the aesthetics, sizes, those types of things is well within local jurisdiction's ability to do.
In the end, I
You'll
still want
find
it to
my
look
lip
nice.
gloss.
Yeah.
Yeah, make it look good.
I want our city to look
Well, and
nice.
honestly, if we make it look bad, it's also going to deter businesses as well. So
And we
it's
want
kind of a line
businesses and
there.
we want it to look nice.
That's
And
right.
we want them to brand.
Okay.
That's my
That's
opinion.
right.
Okay,
agree.
well, I think I have good feedback. I'll start working on some red lines and some proposal language we can look at in another meeting. Okay,
Good. All right. Are we going to move on to number 2? I apologize. I might have to leave in 15 minutes.
you okay? Actually,
I thought you were
I,
gonna leave 15.
Scott?
on this next agenda item, I mostly just wanted to check in with training. I'm not familiar with all the training that you may have had this year, but we
Oh,
are
so much.
required to have training every year. Do you guys know
Alan's
if,
going. He's leaving.
Alan's
There's our
leaving.
trainer right there. Our trainer just walked out. That's how the training's gone.
run away.
I have to
He
say,
can't
I
even defend
missed,
himself.
the one training we've had this year with the city council. Emily, were you there?
That was
Yeah.
just a combined meeting.
That was like just. a
Wasn't it
Yeah.
training too,
Meeting.
though?
No, we just talked
mean,
about
Were you
mixed
asleep
use.
during the?
Oh, I wasn't asleep. We were talking about density of
That's right.
residential.
That's right. That's
There's
right.
no sleeping.
I looked this up to see what it was, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Do we watch a video or something?
And the,
We had to do training. Remember, I did training online and I got my little certificate and you guys
I did no
didn't.
training.
Was that this year?
Yes,
Okay.
just a few months ago. That was the
She'll
online.
bring in her certificate and show you.
Didn't you do it, Dwight?
I don't remember.
I'm amongst
Okay,
giants.
you are.
You guys are
I
Well,
did do
we-
training online. It was interesting. I could do it again
That's
and
just what I looked
relearn
up.
it.
Well, if you
stuff.
Are we
have
supposed
your,
to do that
if you have
open
your
public?
certificate,
I did go to that city
Hey.
association of Utah Association of Cities.
That counts
Yes.
for 2 years of training.
Yes, because there was something, I'll have to look back in the minutes. They wanted us to all get trained within a
Mhm.
certain amount of time.
Right.
And it was an online training and you read this. It was very interesting. You read it and took a little test.
Oh,
And at the
I've
end, they gave
never-
you a little
And I
certificate.
didn't do it, so now we're not gonna get her transportation funding.
oh no.
So
That's when
Scott,
you
is
just-
that what we're talking about here? This kind of
Yeah.
training?
So as your new community development director, one of the things under my purview is
He's
to
like-
make sure our planning commission is educated.
Way to let them know none of us are educated.
One thing that I
have a
ran
strong opinion
into,
about this.
Scott, you're doing great. So
Great.
keep coming, keep coming.
down in Weaver County, so their planning commission was actually under a little bit of heat because of some of the decisions that they were making, because the public felt like they weren't educated. And it came down to us showing them, no, they've gone through the state mandated amount of training and they are up to speed on the projects and they have done what they need to do to be in their position.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that you guys have any heat on any decisions that I am aware of, but it does kind of come down to, we are making decisions on behalf of the public. The public wants to make sure that we're at least doing what we can to be up to speed on your
Mhm.
role and on our processes. So there is a certain amount of training required for each new planning commissioner before they start their first meeting. So that's luckily not something you need to worry about, but there's also ongoing annual training that we have to have. I think that the easiest way to
Revolving training.
achieve this, if you look at the agenda, there's a website there on this item. Okay, if you type this in or go to it, it goes to this state training portal. Super easy. They have these silly little videos. You watch for a couple minutes. You take a 5-question quiz, and there you go. You have your certificate, and you're at least up to speed on some basic, local governance.
They
training.
wouldn't print off my certificate. That was it. I
guess you'll
remember
have to
telling
do it again.
Spencer, I remember
I
telling
tried that in
Spencer,
school,
they
too.
didn't print off my certificate. They kept saying, yeah, whatever, at the very end. But I'll do it again.
She kept doing the training.
Yep.
I'll be triple trained. It actually was, it was very interesting. It was
Was it?
interesting.
So
It
are-
was good.
Okay.
It was
Based on
good.
this, are we just supposed to do that one right now? Or are you just wanting
Yeah,
us to do
I
the
think it's
open and public meetings?
Yeah, I think
act
this
training?
is actually required every year, this
Yeah.
specific topic, open and public training or open and
Yes.
public meetings, just so you're aware of how these public meetings function.
Okay.
How to conduct a public hearing, how to have, an open meeting, what noticing are we required to have
Okay.
before we can consider certain
Trying to do
items,
all my
those,
job.
parliamentary procedure, how do we run a meeting efficiently? So if you have a moment, follow that link, take
Okay.
15 minutes to watch the video and take the quiz and then print off your certificate so I can have something in hand.
Turn it off. I have to remember. Tell
Um,
Spencer this.
So yeah, I won't take up any more of your guys' time tonight, but if you wouldn't mind adding that to your to-do list when you get a moment. And then when you have a certificate, take a screenshot, print it. If you can't, you should have a digital record because you do have to create an
Yeah.
account on this website.
Yeah,
That
you
we
have to
can
create an
find a way to
account.
get a record of it. And then we'll just file that away and we'll just make sure that we're all up to speed on our
Okay.
training every year.
Another thing, Scott, that we had talked about, and when we got new commissioners on, is to once in a while, as when we have a short meeting, to just introduce, just go through the process of when we have, a
particular
developer coming
item.
in
Mhm.
with a subdivision they want to get, just, because when I got put on the board, nobody said anything to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you
It was
too.
only you, Nan.
It was Eric and
I got
I,
great
Eric's
training.
gone. Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
So we talked a little bit about taking a few minutes and saying, this is how you go through this process. This is the process of what happens when somebody wants to do a subdivision,
Mhm.
go through the staff process. Just explain that.
What
So,
type of a decision it is.
Yeah.
Zoning.
yeah, I don't know if Heather's even had that. The rest of us have been here long enough that we know that.
Sure.
But anything like that, maybe once in a while, it's good to,
Yeah. And honestly, there are some books.
Oh, you lost me. Said books.
you have to go watch a video.
If anybody wants some light reading, this actually is a very good book if you're just wanting to get as much into your brain as quick as possible. It's Utah specific. It's put together by the Utah Land Use Institute,
And we all got one of those.
and you probably have a copy of this.
Didn't we get one? Didn't Spencer give us all one of those?
I've never been given.
I've
any.
never
I've got
been
an
given
extra
one of
one that I
those.
can lend out if you'd like to read a few chapters, but it is really, it's really cool. So if you're
Yeah.
trying to understand what is a legislative item, what is an administrative item, what is a conditional use permit, and what your role in those decisions are, this is great. And if you want a copy, I can lend this one out to you.
Wants to keep us all.
Did you just hear what Jeff said? You don't want us to be too knowledgeable because we won't want to do what you want us to do. Are we ready to make a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I just have one comment, actually, in seriousness. So I've been thinking a lot about this moderate income housing thing. I don't know why it's bothered me, but it has. And I was actually listening to some other commissioners and city officials along the Wasatch Front. I mean, everyone's perplexed with this, and how do we do it? How do we navigate it? Most of us are talking about it because we have to, right?
Mhm.
And I think for next year, I would really, the thing that's been frustrating to me is I don't even know what the target is. And I think if we're really going to do it, then let's do it. And let's define what is moderate income. What's our target? What are we, because it's the easy lever for, we're all just, everybody's about density. And that's because we're hearing it from the developers.
Mhm.
Is that really, if I go open up all this land for more townhomes, does that really move the needle? I don't think it does. But we don't know because we're not, no one's ever defined and given to me, what is the target? What are we trying to create? A $500,000 townhome probably isn't meeting it either.
No.
Do we need to look at, mid-rise apartment buildings, or what do we need to do? Because I think there's things that we can do. I don't want to go down the road for years and we're all just like tiptoeing around density and rezoning
Mhm.
when we don't really know what the target is that we're going after, right?
Yeah.
I want to give you a heads up because we're going to talk about it next year, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But I really think we really should define and say, what is it that we need to go after to meet this? Because I think probably the majority of cities and counties are just trying to navigate and figure out what we're being mandated to do.
Mhm.
But I think there's things that we can do on our end to try and define what does that mean? And
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable, and maybe that's why I've been resistant. Maybe part of the reason I've been resistant to some of the density conversation, because I'm like, does that really move the needle? Or are we just selling our soul out to try and meet a requirement that we really haven't defined, or we haven't defined?
What's the
target?
finish line?
Well,
Right.
and I think we talked about this last time, Jeff, when you weren't here.
Okay.
And because I think
Just
we all
disregard
have,
what I
we all
shared.
have the same, no, we all have the same concerns.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think we addressed it as much as we,
That's why I just think
Good.
everyone's uncomfortable with it
because
we-
nobody knows.
we don't really,
Yeah.
what does modern income housing mean to North Logan?
So I don't know if you guys want, I can kind of give you a little bit of a spiel as far as my experience working with Weber County and addressing this question over the last couple of years. It's a moving target. And the reason why I say that is because we keep having babies. We keep having people move into
Yeah.
town. We have people making various incomes. Our incomes are stratified from the most wealthy down to the
Yeah.
the entry level high school worker working a minimum wage job, right? We have everything in between in our community. We should try to find housing for everybody in that spectrum. What we're looking for is, what is our demand? how many households do we have in our jurisdiction that are making an income at or below 80% of the area median income? What that basically means is Cache County wide, the median income is $60,500 and change. So that's the median income county-wide. 80% of that is like 45,000 and change. So we're looking at trying to find housing for a family or a household that makes $45,000 a year. Affordability is defined as spending no more than a third of your income on your housing costs. So that's your mortgage and your utilities have to be a third of your income. At $45,000 a year, 12 months out of the year, you have a mortgage payment of about $1,300 a
Yeah.
month.
So that's
And
why I'm saying
utilities.
$500,000 townhome doesn't,
You'll never get
but
there.
that's that's where everything goes to
Mhm.
is, oh, let's just increase the density. And I'm like, that isn't going to move the needle.
Sure. So
necessarily,
I'm
yeah.
hoping I just gave you an idea of what the target is.
That's the target I want to understand.
Yeah.
It's now let's translate it. Because to me, then that means high density mid-rise apartment buildings,
But not if they
trailer
cost
courts. I don't know.
what they cost.
Not if they cost that much, right? So $1,300 a month, and that has to also include your utilities. You're about $1,000 a month, right, of your mortgage payment, and then you have utilities on top of it. That's what we're trying to do. There's two facets to this: housing at an affordable amount, or incomes rising with the cost of housing, which it hasn't.
Mm-mm.
Housing has gone up, incomes have stayed stagnant. They've grown at maybe
Mhm.
2 or 3% a year. Housing has gone up 20% per year, right? So we have this growing delta
Mhm.
of affordability.
Mhm.
So there's two things we can do. We can do economic development and try to bring in higher paying jobs. So our median income increases. So our housing is more attainable at their
Mm.
current price, try to close that delta, or find a way to bring the housing down to the income, or both. We're trying to shrink that
I like
delta
that.
down. And at the end of the day, it's how many households are at this income level? How many housing units do we have in our jurisdiction to accommodate that quantity? That number of households could increase or it could decrease if, for example, as households get better paying jobs in town and they go out of that 80% bracket, now they're at 100% of AMI.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things. It's not just one thing. And you're right, density is not the only answer, because if we rezone a piece of property to double the density, the person who is selling that property is going to double the price.
Yeah.
And the developer is going to buy that piece of property at double the price. And then
Mhm.
guess what? All that
We didn't do
savings.
anything, but
Yeah.
we sold out to higher density.
So what it is the buyer, the
Yeah.
developer has to buy at a low price. We have to give them additional density after the purchase so that they have that in their pro forma where they can pass those savings along to the buyer. But how many developers are going to want to say, well, I'm just going to take a lower ROI to sell at a price point?
Mhm.
That's where it gets tricky. Because
And
if they
the-
buy
Right.
at a fantastic deal, a piece of property and get more density, we need to find a way to make sure that that cost
Trickles all the way
trans-
through.
all the
And
way
that's
through
where
the
I think
buyer.
that's where it's
Right.
bothered me.
And
That's
how
what's
do we
tough.
And they-
document the demand?
We can document the demand, and it's actually something we have to do every year with our reporting to the state. So we know how many housing units we have at certain income levels. So the assessor's office gave me a great big spreadsheet that I'm already working on, poking through to see how many dwellings are valued at a certain value to where they could be considered affordable to a moderate income household.
Mhm.
It's not going to be very much, but I have to crunch those numbers and get that together for the state. It's called the gap analysis, where we say how many households do we have at this income level and how many dwelling units do we have at this level? What is our deficit? I doubt we have a surplus. I'd be amazed if we did, but I guarantee we don't. So I hope that makes sense, is what's the target? It's a
Yeah.
moving target, and it depends
It
on how many
is.
households we have at certain income levels and how many housing units we have at certain price points.
And that's the crazy thing is with a son that's finally bought a home, looking for 8 months to buy a home in Cache Valley and to look at the homes
That they're able to afford.
that they are able to afford and to watch the interest rates. I mean, there's a whole bunch of factors
Mhm.
in here. And I think it's
That we can't
interesting. I
control.
think homes aren't selling as quickly now and they're lowering their prices because they're not selling as quickly because interest rates are going up.
Right.
So
And we have
um,
all these households that are sitting on the sidelines waiting and hoping that
it's
something
crazy. Yeah.
changes.
Anyway,
But those are all things outside of the control, and that's
Yeah.
where,
Right.
that's where I
Everything-
struggle with this,
everything's
that the
outside of our
market has to.
control.
What is local
Drive some of
government's
that.
what is our role in this process?
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
To move
So
on
when's our
target
next
always.
meeting?
our next meeting is October
20th?
20th.
You have a vacation in between for the conference if you'd like to go.
Yep. Okay. We done, Scott?
Oh, I just kidding.
Just be quiet. Yeah. Say,
I'll wait till after.
do you have a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Scott. Thanks. I think this is good working ideas.
Good deal. Okay.
Welcome to this group.